The accounting practices at a major international corporation lead to the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars, causing wave upon wave of layoffs at that corporation. How do you react to the guy who responds to this by complimenting the proficiency of the accounting department for preventing the loss of hundreds of millions more? A major city has a significant portion of its populace actually living below sea level. The ocean is held back from this part of the city by a row of levees. These hold until a hurricane breaches them, flooding that part of the city. The flood leaves most of these people stranded on their roofs for days awaiting rescue. When that rescue finally comes, how do you react to the people who begin heaping accolades upon the rescuers for not taking days longer to arrive? Thousands of the denizens in this part of the city die before rescuers can reach them from a combination of drowning, suffocation, disease contracted from the consumption of untreated water, disease contracted from unsanitary conditions, dehydration, and various other causes. How do you react when wild adulation is heaped upon the rescuers for preventing the deaths of thousands more? As a child, I once saw a documentary on television about a very grim period in U.S. history. I don't recall the name of the plague, but it swept across the continent, killing tens of thousands at least. This disease appeared suddenly, and just as suddenly, halted. I was watching with my father, and at one point he responded by saying, "And some people say there's no God." Now my father is Mormon, but this is a recurrent pattern of religiously theistic logic. Something bad happens, and predictably someone calls it a miracle that it wasn't worse. A disaster causes the deaths of 200 people, and someone calls it a miracle that it wasn't 300. But when it is 300, someone calls it a miracle that it wasn't 400. But somehow the death of 400 is a miracle that it wasn't 500. Beneath the Earth's crust, convection currents in the mantle are always at work, pushing tectonic plates in different directions. Sometimes they push two plates together, causing them to spend millennia slowly rising along the fault line. Sometimes they push two plates past one another for several millennia, and the friction along the fault line makes the area around the fault line especially prone to earthquakes. Sometimes they slowly push two plates away from one another, making the area around this particular fault line especially prone to volcanic eruptions. But sometimes, when pushing two plates together, a subduction zone develops, in which one plate is slowly pushed under the other. Unfortunately, the process is usually not smooth. Friction between the tectonic plates has a relatively minor folding effect on the higher plate, but the weight of the plate is continuously pulling it back down, with the result that pressure builds up until the point at which the weight of the plate is greater than the friction pulling it back, and it releases. Movement, which has been taking place slowly over millennia, is undone in minutes. In this case, a tectonic plate several kilometers thick and thousands of kilometers long moves several kilometers in the relative blink of an eye. When this takes place on the floor of an ocean, it displaces thousands of tons of water, causing a tsunami. In 2004, this happened on the floor of the Indian Ocean, and the resulting wave devastated the rim of that ocean, killing 250,000 people, wounding millions more, and putting tens of millions out of their homes. Some speculate that God's handedness was preventing the plate from shifting another direction, which probably would have led to the death of more than 1 million people. So here we have it, that this is probably not just the death of 250,000, but the miraculous survival of 750,000. Why did the plate have to shift at all? Indeed, why did the subduction zone have to form in the first place? If these convection currents weren't there, or if their direction was a little more erratic, this pressure would not have spent millennia and probably eons building up. It would not have built up and therefore would not have released. Was God unable to prevent this effect? Was there something God was unable to do? So what I want to know this time is how great would the disaster have to be in order for it to be seen as a disaster instead of a miracle?